Navigate the lily pads, catch the flies, and avoid the hungry fish. It's eat or be eaten in this Chromeworks original Scratch game tutorial.
Hello, my name is Liam. I'm a co-op student here at Chromeworks, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make character movement and flies in the game Ribbit on Scratch. Alright, so this is a starter file for the game. You'll be able to find a link to that in the description. And the frog and these three lily pads are supposed to have the Chromeworks animation script. You can find a tutorial on how to make those on the Chromeworks website. So the first thing you want to do is make everything the right size and spawn in the right place. So in each lily pad we have making sure it's shown at the beginning. We want it to set to the back layer so it's behind the frog. Set the size to 240%. That makes it so that it's the correct size. And just to make it a little different, you can have point in direction and pick a random direction. That way it's different every time. And you also want to set the animation to just the regular lily pad. And it's all the same for these ones. The only difference is when it sets the position, you want the X variable to be different for each of them. So for this one, it's going to be negative 136. This one is 2. And this one is 138. Alright, so the next thing you want to do is go to the frog, make sure it's showing, and you want this one to point in the direction 90. So 90 degrees. And the size will be 50%. And on the start, we're going to have it spawn in the middle. You can have it spawn on the other ones if you want, but all you have to do is change the X to whatever the X is for the lily pads. Then we want to set it to its idle frog animation. And the next thing we're going to do is make the jumping physics. So when you're on a lily pad, you want to be able to jump to the next ones by pressing the arrow keys. So how we're going to do that is we have this define hop. So we're going to have one for each direction. So define hop, and if you press the left arrow key and the X position is equal to 2, so he's on the middle lily pad, then set the animation to the jumping animation. So it has the jumping animation right here. We want to point in the direction 90, so it's going to be pointing this way instead. And then we're going to have it make the ribbit noise, which we have right here, and glide to the first lily pad. So 0.3 seconds. I think that's a good amount of time for it to take to go there, but you can make it longer or shorter if you want. And then after it's there, then it'll point back into the regular direction, and it will go back to its idle animation. So I have 4 of these, and it's 1 for each direction. So put this up here. The only difference between each of these is if it's going right, then you want to change this to right arrow key. And the first direction, you want to change it to 90 instead of negative 90. And as well, you want to change the lily pad. So if it's going right from the middle, you want to go to lily pad 3. So change this to lily pad 3 and change this to hoppable 3. The hoppable we're going to be using later, but we need to put this into the script now. Another thing we want to change is the X position from where it's going to start. So if the left arrow key is pressed and he's in the middle, then he goes to lily pad 1. But if the lily pad or the left arrow key is pressed when he's at 138, which is at lily pad 3, then he's going to go to lily pad 2, not lily pad 1. So this determines what lily pad he's standing on. So change this X to whatever you put the lily pad at, or else it won't work. If it's 1 off, then it won't work. So I change it to 37. Go here, pressing the left arrow key, and it's not doing anything because he's not at 137, he's at 138. And as you can see now, it works, and he makes the noise, and he goes in both directions. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is we want to make it so that when you press the space bar, he sticks his tongue out, and so he's able to catch flies if his tongue touches. So, first thing you want to add is this. This detects if you press the space bar and he's at one of the lily pads. So if his X position is equal to 2, which is the middle lily pad, if his X position is equal to 138, which is lily pad 3, and if it's negative 136, then it's lily pad 1. So if you press space and he's on the lily pads, because you don't want it to be able to stick his tongue out while you're jumping, because that wouldn't work. So if you press space and he's on the lily pad, it sets his animation to open mouth right here. It broadcasts tongue, which is sent to these two, and wait until tongue is mouth. So this will work. So when the tongue comes out and it comes back, when it comes back to the person or to the frog, it changes the variable back to 1. So it knows when the tongue's back in his mouth, and then it'll set his animation back to normal like this. So you put that right here, right underneath set frog X to X position. And then you go to the tongue tip. And when it receives the tongue, which is here, broadcast tongue, then you want it to show. You want to switch costume to frog tongue. You don't want it to be frog tongue 2, because that's when it's caught a fly. You want to set tongue in mouth from earlier to 0. So the tongue is not in the mouth yet. And you want it to go to the frog's X position, which is set right here, and set the Y position to 108, which is right there in front of his mouth. Next thing, you want to have repeat until it's either touching first fly or the second fly, or its position is smaller, or its Y position is smaller than negative 150. So that'll make it so if it touches the bottom of the screen, then it'll also come back. So repeat, set returning to mouth to 0, and change Y by negative 10. So change Y by negative 10 so it'll be falling down until it either touches a fly or reaches the edge of the screen. Returning to mouth is used later to detect if the tongue is returning to the mouth or not. And then as soon as that's done, you want to set caught fly and returning to mouth to both 1, because by that point it has to have returned by then. And then you want it to repeat until its position is back to the mouth, so greater than 100, and change Y by 10. So instead of negative 10, which will make it go down, we change it by 10, which would make it go up. Then when that's done, that means it's reached the mouth, and you want it to hide, and set tongue and mouth back to 1. The other thing is when you click start, you want to hide. So it won't be just like a random tongue floating there, which would make no sense. Another thing you might want to add is this. If the Y position is not smaller than -50 when it's coming back, you want it to switch to this tongue here, or this frame, because that means it had to have caught a fly by then. And another thing I added was this. So if its costume name is Frog Tongue 2, which is the caught fly thing, then you want to make a crunch sound. But if it hasn't caught a fly, then you don't want it to make a crunch sound, which is the sound here, no fly. Alright, so now we can try it out. Perfect. And I have this fly here, so I put the fly in front, and then I press space, then it eats the fly. It turns it to the right costume, and it makes a crunch noise. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is to make this thing follow that and stretch out, so that instead of just having this little tip come out, you have it look like the entire tongue is stretching out and grabbing the fly. So how we're going to do that is, first, when the green arrow is clicked, or the green flag is clicked, you want it to hide. So that way it's not just a random thing floating. And then you want to add this. So show, when it receives tongue, show it. Set tongue and mouth to 0, because you just spat your tongue out. And go to frog X and Y 108. It's the same as this, just for this one. So that way it's just right in front of the mouth. And then repeat until caught fly is equal to 1, or the Y position is equal to -150, or that is less than -150. Because if you go here, as soon as this thing is returning back to the mouth, it sets caught fly back to 1. And change Y by -10, so it'll always be going down, and create a clone of myself. This is how we're going to make it look like it's just stretching out. It's just going to be a bunch of clones. And to make it look like it comes back, we have this code. When I start as clone, it's always going to check if it's touching the tip of the tongue, then delete this clone. So when this is coming back, it's going to be touching all the clones that were behind it, and it's going to be deleting them as it goes. Alright, after this you want to set caught fly back to 0. It's just to reset it for the next time you stick your tongue out. And repeat until Y position is equal to, or greater than 100. So repeat until it comes back, change Y by 10, which makes it go up 10. Then hide and set tongue and mouth back to 1. So let's try that out. And it works. So the next thing we want to do is have the flies fly around in a pattern, so that you have to jump from lily pad to lily pad to catch all the flies with your tongue, and just so that they're moving around. So first thing we're going to do is set the flies to 0. So this is the fly count at the bottom. So if you catch all the flies, then you win, and if you get eaten, then you lose. But we'll get on that later. You want to set the size to 25%, and you want it to hide, because the actual fly is going to stay hidden, and you're going to be just catching clones of the fly, not the actual fly itself. And then we want it to set the position to 236x, and 11Y. And then, because we want 7 flies on the top, and we're going to have 7 flies on the bottom too. Repeat 7 times. Wait 0.25 seconds and create a clone of myself. 0.25 seconds, I think, is the good amount of time for it to make a clone and then have another clone appear, so that they're good distance apart, not just right next to each other. And then you want to change the fly count by 1. So the fly count will go up as the flies are spawning. And then when I start as clone, you want it to be moving, and once it gets here, you want it to teleport back here, so that it just continues going like this. So that's what we're going to do. When I start as clone, show, so that you can actually see it. And if it's at position 236, so that's where these first clones are going, you want to point in direction 0, so that's up here. And you want it to always change its x value by -5. That way it's always going in this direction. If it's touching the tongue, then you want the fly to delete, because it's going to be going back to the mouth instead. So if it's touching the mouth and the tongue is returning, or the tongue is not returning, so returning to mouth is equal to 0, then wait 0.1 seconds and change the fly count by -1, then delete this clone. The reason we have this is because if it doesn't wait, the tongue doesn't have enough time to register that it touched the fly, and so it doesn't actually go back. It just touches the fly, deletes it, and then keeps going. So we want to have this so that the fly just stays in place a bit, to just give the time for the tongue to figure out what happened. And then we want it, if it touches this edge here, then it'll go back to its original position. So if x position is equal to -236, then it'll go back to the position it started as, which is 236x and 11y. Alright, so we're going to do this again, but on the bottom this time. So after it's done all these, it's going to go to -236 and -140, which is about here. And then we're going to add this, which is pretty much the same thing as this, but instead of 236, it's -236 here. Point in direction is 180, so the opposite direction. And change x, instead of -5, it's 5. So that way it's going in this direction instead of this direction. This is the same, so you can just copy and paste this part to here. And this is pretty much the same as that, except since the original position is different, we want to set this to what's here and make this negative into a positive, like that. And that way, once it's all connected, press start, you can see all these flies growing now. And when you click them, it deletes the flies. You can move and you can grab all the flies. And the fly count is going down as we catch the flies. And the other thing I forgot to mention was, when you start as clone, you want to always be flapping its wings. So wait 0.2 seconds and next costume. That way it's always flapping its wings. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do for this part of the tutorial is we're going to make this other fly fly around, but it's going to be in a different pattern. This one, instead of being just a straight line across, it's going to be like a figured 8. So it's going to go around like this. So just like the first fly, we have this animation script right here, super simple. And just like the first fly again, if it's touching and return to mouth is equal to 0, then you want to delete. So we have this here instead of there. And so the first thing we want to do to make for when it spawns, set the size to 2.25%. You want to hide and go to -180, -180, which is right about here. And we're going to have 10 flies in this loop. So repeat 10 times, wait 0.3 seconds, create a clone of myself, and change flies by 1. This is pretty much the same, except the timing's a little different, and we have 10 here instead of 7, like this one. And so when it starts, we want it to glide to like right about here. So when I start as clone, show, glide to -134 and -26. So when I start it, you can see they all go there, but then they just stick there. Nothing really happens. So if it's always going to check if the fly is here, then point in direction -150 and glide to the next position, which is going to be right over here. And it's the same for all of these. The way you can tell which is which is right here. This is where it's going to, and then the next one checks if it's reached this place, go to the next spot, which is going to be right here. So you're able to change these. You're able to change these up so you can have a different pattern, but the thing you need to know is whatever you put here. So if I want to change this to 135, you have to change in the next one. So this has to be 135 too. And now, as you can see, it goes around in a loop, just like that. And you can see there's different timings for each of them, because that's when it's taking the shorter paths. You don't want it to take 2 seconds, because that'd be way too long. So I changed it to 0.5 so that it wouldn't take so long. And when you're changing, if you want to make a different thing, you got to make sure that this is the right timing. You can just do that by just like trial and error and making sure you get the right one. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it just makes it look more smooth, like they're just going the full way without stopping. So yeah, these are all the right coordinates for the figured 8. Change them if you want. And that's it. Alright, that's everything for part 1 of the Ribbit tutorial. Next week we'll do part 2, and I'll teach you how to make a fish bite the lily pad, so that way there's no reason, or there's a reason to move, because right now you can just stand in the middle and grab all the flies with no worries in the world. And we're also going to do a game over screen and a winning screen, and so I'll see you all next week.